Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. Today I'm joined by State Representative Jake Johnson, a Republican representing Henderson, McDowell, Polk, and Rutherford counties. He's from Polk County, raised on a farm in Saluda, and a graduate of UNC Charlotte. Johnson won his first election at age 22 to the Polk County Board of Commissioners. He's also House Deputy Majority Whip, Vice Chair of Appropriations, and Chair of Approps Capital and Information Technology. Representative Johnson, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So you were 22 when you joined the Board of Commissioners. You're almost 31 now. Happy early birthday.
I know. It's coming up quick. I don't know why 31 feels so much older than 30.
And you're not the youngest one in the house anymore.
Maybe that's what it is. I'm like the old rat in the barn now. Yeah, I've been doing this forever. And yeah, little known fact, I lost when I was 19, and I'm glad people forget that. It was a very good character building experience.
Did you run for county commissioner?
It was county commissioner, and it was before some seats had opened up, so it was very contested that year.
Yeah.
We lost by I think 100 or 200 votes or something like that. And everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, you got so close!" I was like, "I didn't run to get close. I run to win." And so it was very mixed feelings that night. But we looked at where we lost, came back, and was high vote getter the next time. So it was a learning experience. It was probably for the best.
So were you a sophomore in college when you ran, I guess?
Yeah, so I was close enough to where, and that was one reason I went to UNC Charlotte, was where I was one of the first one in my family to ever go to school, that I was, I drive 4.5 hours to get to Raleigh, and that was only an hour and 20 minutes away. So that seems like a nothing commute now. Back then, it felt like I was, traveling the whole state back and forth, but now I drive 4 to 4.5 hours to get here, and that's with no traffic.
So why did you grew up on a farm, small town, so how did you decide, did you already have family or friends in local government?
That the number one question, especially when you get in it young, is, oh, your family must be in politics. Yeah. It could not be the more opposite. My family had nothing to do with politics. They voted every election. They were involved in that way, but it was never anything we talked about unless something crazy was going on. Never something we discussed at the house. But when I got to college, I really want to be a county manager, was why I was going to school. I said, I want to come back, and I always knew I wanted to go back to the mountains, and I was still going back home a lot, very often. And I said, I want to move back here. I want to be in the mountains, and I want to work in local government. And it just so happened that I started talking with local officials and said, if I want to do the kind of things I want to do, I need to be sitting in the seat voting as opposed to being the administrative side of it. So that's how I went back and started talking to local people and ran the first time, and it didn't go as well, but I learned a lot in that one, and then came back and won the next time. And I loved every second of local government. People now the horror stories about local government, and I have my stories where it was you're in the weeds on things, and you go to the grocery store and everyone wants to talk to you about the property taxes and where the dumpster's placed and everything else. But it was really good learning experience. I'm really glad I did it.
Those local council commissioner meetings can be a lot more contentious than the legislature.
If you put the C word, the zoning word on there, you can fill up a building quick. You'll have the fire marshal with people waiting outside. And, we had the big equestrian center was coming out to Polk County in Tryon, close to where I live now. And that was a really contentious issue back then. Now everybody loves it, and it's done a lot for our area. But at the time, I remember we raised the building ordinance 10 feet, and people said Jake Johnson is bringing Manhattan to Polk County, and we went from 50 to 60 feet. So you're only talking, I think, 5 stories for the largest building, and 50 feet. And I was bringing Manhattan to Polk County. But now it's a great economic driver for our area.
what do they, when you go back to your district now, we're recording this in your office in the legislative office building. When you go back on weekends, what do people ask you about? Or is it not as much because it's not that local thing that everyone's talking about?
No, I love being the guy people call, because whether it's local or something at the state, and we have so many great connections with whether it be people we went to school with or people I've worked with or campaigns I've helped with. We have great national, especially now that I have two congressional members, both that I served in the legislature with, Tim Moore as Speaker and Chuck Edwards in the Senate. So we have great contacts federally that, we're a point of contact that whether the dog's barking beside your house and getting on your nerves or you're upset with the federal budget, we get those calls. And I love that. And we get everything. And I said, if I don't have an answer or I can't fix it, I know exactly who to call to make sure it gets done.
Okay. So this past week was crossover, which was kind of like it was busy and there were a lot of bills passed, but it was done by 7:00 Wednesday.
It's weird. Yeah, we didn't have to take the batteries out of the clock or anything. I'll never forget when I first got here. I didn't know that statutorily, we can't go past midnight. We have to gavel in for a new day. So it was a little bit shocking to start packing up at 11:50. And at 11:59, we adjourned and then gavelled back in to reconvene at 12:01 a.m. the next day. Mm-hmm. And we kept going right again. And I think one of the first bills really I ever ran, so I was nervous, and was like 1 or 2 in the morning for crossover. Mm-hmm. And it was just a weird feeling, kind of going and stopping, hurry up and wait. But this time it was very... I think it really helped that we had rules a day before, and all those bills were heard the next morning. Had another rules committee, and we had bills in both. And then we took up all those bills in the afternoon, and we were done by, I think, 8 or 9 o'clock last night, which was very, very refreshing, but very different.
So, well, you served under 2 speakers now, and of course you already know more just from the area of the state. How's Speaker Hall different as far as being, because you have a leadership role in the caucus too? What's his speakership style that's different than Moore's?
I think he learned a lot from Speaker Moore, and I think Speaker Moore learned a lot from Speaker Tillis before him. So you see a lot of the traditions passed down. I will say one thing that's very different this session is when a bill gets to rules, there is no really amending or PCS and anything in rules. It goes back to an area committee. So or a policy committee. It's been very different in that regard. It seems like a very small change, but you see bills that change, get to rules, and then go backwards. Usually when they get to that point, they're on their way to the floor. So I think that's why, and it was a lot more thorough, I think, on the policies. I know people got frustrated with it at times, and I had bills that I went back to committee and said it changed. And it's back. It's actually the same thing you voted on, but we're putting it under the microscope again. So I think people enjoyed that thorough policy debate. But I can imagine members being a little frustrated at times that it goes back. But I think in the end, the public probably appreciated that policy debate. If it was an area they really cared about, being able to see that debated multiple times. So that's a big difference as far as timeline getting a bill heard.
You mentioned microscope, so that's a good segue to oversight and GovOps. So how did you end up on that committee?
It is brand new. So I will say I was the inaugural class of having an oversight committee. And Speaker Moore said in the very beginning, he said, this is going to be one of, if not, the most powerful committees with statutorily what you can do. I think procedurally rules is obviously the most powerful committee, but with being able to bring people in, subpoena documents, and if someone doesn't cooperate, you go to court just like you would a subpoena in a judicial setting. So it was a very different role, and it's way more like a congressional setting and a congressional hearing than it is a policy state committee. So we were kind of trying to just figure everything out on the fly. And some big issues came up. I don't know if you remember the SBI. There was a huge hearing. We had the governor at the time, Roy Cooper's chief of staff came in and was testifying. We had department heads coming in. This year has been way more of you're new, a lot of new department heads. Tell us what your vision is for the agency and what your agency goal is, and that the policies that you're implementing, how they help you achieve that goal. And we've actually, I think, made great progress this year. Just some of the stuff that agencies were doing in the past that we said, we're not giving you money for this anymore. If it's not helping you achieve your goal as an agency, it's not going to be funded anymore. And they've been actually more cooperative than I expected bringing them in.
As we're recording this, there's oversight is scheduled for Thursday. As people are listening, that might change now with, budget subcommittees. What was it going to be about?
So I believe this week we had Commerce coming in, and just reviewing some of their programs and how money gets out the door, what economic development in the state's going to look like, what the western part of the state comeback is going to look like, which has just been, so much. We're actually having a meeting next week, the Helene, subgroup meeting next week. There'll be another funding package come down, which is kind of a disagreement we're having with the Senate right now. I think they put a lot of their Helene funding in the big budget. We would rather keep it separate. And I think there's a lot of advantages to that. One, it doesn't look political when you're negotiating a budget, that you've got all this relief funding tied to every other policy decision being made in the budget. I think the timeline also, that if there's federal funds we need to draw down, being able to move faster and be more nimble is easier when you've got a separate budget bill running. So we'll work that out, I'm sure, but that's kind of a big separation right now we're at.
How do you think with Helene funding, and that it's not a lot of it is coming from the federal government, and the state can't totally fund? I mean, it's massive amounts of money. Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen this year, or at least this legislative session? Well,
we're going to have to ask some tough questions. We're going to have to say, we want to help small businesses, but throwing $100,000 at somebody that they're not coming back. That was a big problem during COVID. You had businesses go out that, obviously we didn't agree with, but you had businesses going out that we were giving these forgivable loans to, for lack of better words, and there was no chance they were coming back. I mean, they would even say that. I mean, and the banks did not want to carry these loans. So when we're looking at a grant program for small businesses, how do we vet who's actually coming back, or do we need to reinvest that in businesses coming there? I ran a bill last week with a select site program that's going to be huge, bringing jobs to our region, and hopefully making up some of the businesses we lost. So a lot of tough questions, and whether we land, whatever number we land on, doing something for small businesses, something for local governments, fire mitigation. We've had great conversations with the governor. Our dynamic with the governor is very interesting. We really haven't had that big big override yet, or controversy yet. But, we know that's coming at some point, something that we know is coming. But right now, we've actually got a good line of communication with him. We want to make sure we keep that up.
Do you think, Governor Stein's approach is a lot different than former Governor Cooper?
It could not be more different. Yeah. It is. I will say I've talked with Stein more in probably the past 2 weeks than I did Cooper in 8 years. And obviously, some run-ins we had with them didn't make that relationship any better on oversight. But Stein's approach has been, if we can work out differences ahead of time before the bill gets to me, let's do it. Cooper's approach was, send it to me, I'm going to veto it, and good luck finding the votes. And we usually did, which I didn't really understand that approach when clearly we were moving in a direction that we were going to be able to override things, and we did. But Stein's approach has been, let's work it out on the front end. That way we can get a bill to me I can sign. And I thought the Helene bill was a great example, working with his staff to get something he signed it that night. So I think we're going to have a lot more cooperation. Obviously, we're not going to agree on a lot of things, but to that extent, we've had really good line of communication with him so far.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more. I want to ask you about Stein and how that factors into the budget, too, and if that'll become law or not. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
So good, so good, so good.
New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
It's crunch time at work, and you need to bring wings to your workday. Visit redbull.com/gettingitdone and answer a couple questions about your work style to get a Spotify customized playlist tuned to your productivity. Plus, score a can of Red Bull on us while you go from to-do to done. And remember, Red Bull gives you wings. Supplies are limited. Terms apply. Visit the website for more information.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with State Representative Jake Johnson, a Polk County Republican. Before the break, we were talking about Governor Stein and working with Republicans across the aisle and about the budget. So let's talk more about how the budget is going to play out as people are listening to this on Tuesday. As the last information that I had before recording this is one of the top budget chairs, Representative Donnie Lambeth, said that on Thursday this week, it'll be the area budget committee. So we'll actually see some of the budget, not the top lines that will come on Monday, and then go into full approps on May 20th. Again, like anything that happens in the General Assembly, that's probably what's going to happen. It's not guaranteed that's what's going to happen. But with you being on the inside of this, what would make it not happen, really? Is it going to be those area committees or something with amendments? What would change?
So I think this year, under the same theme we talked about before, with things being a lot more heavily publicly policy debated, I think that's probably one of the reasons you're going to see these area committees actually broken out and kind of debated separate, which I actually like. It felt like in past years, we go into the full approach meeting. As IT chair, I go up there and say, yep, we got broadband money, cybersecurity money, and data storage money, on to the next one. And how productive is that really for anybody? I mean, I don't know how much we're really getting out of that or how much the public is. I like the fact that we're debating it separately and then, coming together, and the big chairs will probably present, what those top lines are. But people have a chance to see that what the fruition of a lot of work in windowless rooms that people sit in and go through this budget, and the full chairs, my goodness, they have that is a truly thankless job. Like, they sit for hours in these rooms, and then my group comes in and presents, and then right after that, I think they even went in after crossover last night when everyone was worn down and exhausted. They were going in and working the budget till late last night. So those guys do a great job of it, and we've got some really good people at the helm. So I think that same points of contention in past years are going to be points of contention. Whether or not, I think it's still a question mark whether he would agree to sign a budget ahead of time or let it become law without his signature. I can certainly see a scenario to where we put enough of the funding in there that he wants to see for projects and areas, and the policy is something he could live with but not necessarily likes. That he's said a lot about school funding, clearly same as past years, and I think 60-something% of our budget now is education funding. So that's always a top priority for us too, just by the numbers. I think there's some disagreement on the voucher program. Right. He again, like Cooper, doesn't like. But some of these areas are in bad trouble, and we can't force kids into these situations. But I think probably the same points of contention are going to be there. I can absolutely see a scenario where all three of the things could happen, where he either signs it and says, there's enough good funding in there, I can live with it. He vetoes it, and we have to find the votes to override, which I think practically we probably could. And then I can see a scenario where he goes, I don't want my name on this, but I know it needs to happen, and lets it become law without a signature. Those very likely scenarios in all ways.
There doesn't seem to be a huge point of contention like there was with Cooper and Medicaid expansion. Yes. Yep. And I mean, Stein has already said he wants to freeze the tax cuts. Yes. Senate Leader Berger is not worried about that. Yes. So I don't know. Is this more of a House versus Senate on the amount of money in the rainy day fund and the speed of the tax cuts?
Yeah, we definitely have different ways of looking at it, I would say. Historically, I would say in a year like this, the House has been more willing to go to reserve fund on these types of projects that, whether it be maintenance on buildings, whether it be, building things and repairs, whatever it is, broadband infrastructure, cyber. But I think this year you saw the Senate go to the a lot on these things. And I don't know if it's because it's a bad budget year as far as, obviously we got 25 counties out there that took a huge hit. Yeah. So we already knew it wasn't going to be a great budget year with revenues. I don't know if that factored more into it, or they knew the tax cuts were coming and slowing things down as far as the revenues. So I think it was a perfect storm of a lot of things that happened that inspired them to go to reserve fund a lot, that we actually, at least in my area budget, we looked at it and said, whoa, that's not what we've seen in the past. So we've actually had to go in and in a fiscally responsible way try to figure out where to cut and where we can go to those area reserve budgets.
Where do you see the Senate had looked at about 800 state employee positions? Is that about what you think the House would look at, where it's a smaller, if it's actual jobs, it's less than 1,000, or just a little bit, here and there as far as compared to what the, current White House is doing, where it's getting rid of a lot of things at once?
Well, obviously what we saw in the Senate budget was if there was vacant positions, they just said those positions are not going to be anymore. We're just doing away with those. And you've got what you've got, and we're not going to fill anymore. At least that's how it was in my area, and I haven't had a chance to do a huge deep dive in other ones. But we've actually got a pretty interesting approach. My plan, at least for some departments, would be to go in and see where we can automate these positions. And with those lapsed salary dollars, instead of going straight back to general fund, we would actually let the department keep a certain percentage of those lapsed salary funds to increase salaries. Say, don't ask us for more money. We're giving you the lapsed salaries that you're not utilizing right now. We're putting those into raises within your department. It would stay within your department. The rest of the money would go to analyzing the next department. We would go and there's a lot of AI behind the scenes of going in and saying things that used to be you had to fill out a form and you had to have a person checking it. Now it's all automated, where I think we could probably eliminate a lot of these positions that not necessarily go in and do like the federal and fire everybody, but you go in and say what could be streamlined and automated using blockchain and AI. And then we use that money and reinvest within that department. I think it's a very different approach than saying eliminate, put it in the general fund. I think we're a little bit more flexible within the agencies.
Do you think the agencies are, because the vacancy rate is still pretty high?
Going agency to agency, some are very high.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm an employee within that agency, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going with the House version. I want that money reinvested in my agency. Go in, figure out what positions maybe 30 years ago, we did need somebody at the DMV to by hand check all these things and, scan it in.
Yeah.
Now we can automate that online. It gets same with DEQ and permitting, where we used to have someone go manually check all these things, automate it, eliminate that position, and give the guy a raise that actually needs to do the manual work of going out and inspecting the sites and looking over the really, weirder scenarios. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're talking about state employees and buildings, and it's capital and IT. So what can you tell us about capital projects that'd be in the budget or just, already underway?
In theory, or in 30,000 foot view, I would say we're really being thorough going through this capital budget and saying if you received the money, and this is no particular project, but if you received the money 5 years ago and you've only spent 10% of it, and the project, and we're supposed to give you another 50 to 100 million this year for a big building or something with the system. Could we use that money better somewhere else in the short term? Just knowing it's not going to be a great year to pump a ton of money from general fund into the SCIF. Yeah. Can we go in there and reallocate that money and start a new project without us, double encumbering money, like using money that we're going to need down the road? Could we start new projects? Could we, if one is still in the design phase and is slated to get a ton more money and it's already got enough to get to the, actually breaking ground phase, let's put that toward another project instead of pouring more money into it or having to push projects back years. So I think we're being very thorough. I would say there's some where you will see money reallocated from projects that are out there. Some proposed projects you may see eliminated completely if there's not a huge demand for it right now. And then I think you will see buildings repurposed.
So they really should have already started if they got the money, or it's going to be.
You got the money years ago and you're still waiting on permits and zoning and things that probably should have already been done. You may see this slate of money that you were supposed to get reallocated to a new project. And again, that may only be a handful of instances, but when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in a tight budget year, we have to be very strategic about how we use it.
Are there any projects in particular that you're willing to say? Or?
I would say there's some that are huge dollar projects that I just don't see the public outcry for, and we've got sufficient space for where we're already using it.
Well, one thing already under construction across the street is the education campus. I guess
I can't park there anymore. Now I got to find parking. That one's underway, on schedule and really moving along. So that one I feel pretty good about. I think there's some state-owned places where we could probably go in and I will say, looking at selling very valuable land and consolidating some things and helping pay for things internally with agencies. So being very smart without being too specific, I think we can really utilize things better.
So the Bath building is coming down. That's just going to be green space. Yeah. So there's nothing that, funding there beyond planting grass, I guess, or something.
And I think there's some buildings that if we stayed on now, that if we either sold or repurposed, what the bang for the buck would go a lot further.
But there's not a building that's suddenly going to it'll disappear.
No, I don't think anything too crazy. You're not going to see me out with a wrecking ball anytime soon.
Okay. Well, we're close to being out of time, so let's move on. Speaking of the building, I ask everyone that's a lawmaker or works here, we're in your office in the legislative office building. There's the snack bar here. There's the cafeteria and snack bar in the legislative building. Do you have an order? Do you eat there? What do you get?
So obviously fried chicken day is very popular. I have been known if I'm feeling like very healthy, I'll try to get a salad. I'll try. But my go-to for anyone who knows me really well, if it's been a really stressful day and I just need like 30 minutes to reset, I'm going to go to Chick-fil-A there in what I guess is still Cameron Village or Village, whatever it is. And I'll go to Chick-fil-A and then I'll go find a random place to park and hide. And then I'll watch either 2.5 Men or something funny, or everybody knows I'm a huge James Bond fan. See the Daniel Craig behind us in the office. So huge James Bond fan. So I'll go watch Casino Royale that I've seen 1,000 times. And I'll eat my Chick-fil-A in the car, probably get a stain on my shirt somewhere. And then I'll come back to the building totally refreshed and reset. So that's my secret, that if you see my plate parked somewhere randomly, don't come beating on the door like that. Like I need that 30 minutes to reset.
So did you hear that, lobbyist?
I'm hiding for a reason. Okay. So, and then police, if I'm parked illegally, just cut me a break for 30 minutes while I reset. And then I'll come back to the building refreshed and we can get things done.
So don't make your pitch during
during my 30 minute James Bond funny show time.
All right. So let's wrap up with our picks for headliner of the week. I'll go first. It's been 6 months is how long it took. It was Jefferson Griffin finally conceding the Supreme Court race. So to my colleague Kyle Ingram and all the reporters out there with the constant churn and everyone else that's been paying attention to this. Of course, we'll see what happens now with Riggs staying on the court and then other changes with Board of Elections. And my sub-headliner would be the Karen Brinson Bell,
yes.
Losing her job with the new majority appointed by Outer Bullock, and then Sam Hayes, who is general counsel to Speaker Hall. That's now part of the election. So some big news. And the, a third branch of government world anyway. So Representative Johnson, who or what is your pick for headliner of the week?
Well, as we're recording this, I'm not Catholic, but I saw we have an American Pope, so that's interesting. I know he's Peru. He lived in.
In Peru for a long time, from Chicago. I think.
Yeah, but from America, so that's from the United States. So that's very interesting. That happened today.
Yeah,
and then just really the speed things have been going on around here. I think anyone who's covered politics in North Carolina for a lot of amount of time, we've seen sessions where we've been up here. I've seen Halloween candy out. I think I've had some Thanksgiving breaks around here. I've seen snow in Raleigh more than I've ever seen before, but I think it's just a weird year. But it's been the speed things have moved up here while still being debated. So I think just the speed of things moving, but also hopefully, getting everyone out at a reasonable time this year. Other states statutorily go home at a certain time of the year where, like I said, we've been here 14 months before working on a budget long session. So I think it's worth noting that our leadership has done a really good job of getting things in and out, sticking to a schedule, and making sure that hopefully we have a budget done in the next few weeks and everybody gets to go home and enjoy summer and get back to the other side of their world and turn around, and it'll be campaign season again soon.
So crossover ended a day early. The conclave for the Pope was early. That was a surprise. So we'll see. We'll circle back in October and see if there's the Thanksgiving budget year, the budget year of no budget, but
and me chairing
maybe this
oversight,
is
I go into an interim committee. So I said, whether y'all want to go home, I'm usually here once a month or twice a month, either way. So I'm here. I have to be here more than most people are, but to be able to go home and people spend time with their families would be nice.
Well, you could, oversight of the budget taking too long. And
Yes,
how
there we
efficient
go.
is
Hey, we'll bring everybody in and say, what's going on, guys? We're going to work this thing out.
All right. Representative Johnson, thank you for being on. Appreciate it. For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Sign up for our political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.